Education is what's important. Training, preparation for the expected. Education, preparation for the unexpected.
Good afternoon or good evening, Team Krulak community, and on behalf of Marine Corps University, the Marine Corps University Foundation, and the Krulak Center for Innovation and Future Warfare, welcome back to the Brewcast, our series designed to connect the worlds of the warfighter and PME with the best in innovative and creative thought. I'm your host, Major Ian Brown, Operations Officer at the Krulak Center. Before we begin, please remember that all opinions expressed here are those of the individual and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Krulak Center, Marine Corps University, United States Marine Corps, United States Army, or any other agency of the U.S. government or any other entity with which our guests may be affiliated. To set the scene for today's episode, we need to take you all back through the mists of time to the elder days of this past March. The Army Leader Exchange decided to run its own March Madness tournament online, highlighting military media content creators. And after many intense rounds of voting, the finalists, who we all have with us on the panel today, stood poised to claim the title of Content Creator Champion. Now, while few of us need an excuse to build yet another playoff bracket during March, this contest also shined a light, one of those things. I'm sure Elena or Nikki can correct my grammar here. Put a light on just how different military leaders and curators of military professional development content were using social media platforms to share useful educational knowledge with a wider community. So we're very excited today to have the finalists join us to share their perspectives on the usages of social media as a knowledge base, engagement tool, and professional development resource for those in uniform or those who support those in uniform looking to prepare themselves and their subordinates and their teams for the challenges of future warfare. So we'll start off with the birthday girl. We have Sasha Maggio with us, who currently works as an analyst for the United States Air Force in Germany. She runs the Mother of Tanks accounts on Twitter and other social media platforms. Her latest online contributions include running a year-long history series with the Army's Combined Arms Center, the Center of Military History, and our own National Museum of the Marine Corps. Next, we have Nikki Dean, who is a retired Army aviation officer, currently attending the University of Kansas's Museum Studies graduate program. Her military career has spanned numerous assignments from Germany to Korea, multiple deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, and her last assignment as a doctrine developer for the U.S. Army Combined Arms Doctrine Directorate included her to new mediums and methods of sharing the U.S. Army's body of knowledge with new audiences to include social media, YouTube, and the Breaking Doctrine podcast. She tweets at Doctrinatrix-C2. Third, we have Brewcast veteran Dr. Elena Wicker, who is a Presidential Management Fellow with the U.S. Army. She's currently a feature concept developer at U.S. Army Futures Command and has previously worked for the RAND Corporation and the Defense Intelligence Agency. Her research explores the history of military jargon and the bureaucratic power of terminology in concepts, doctrine, and strategy. She's collected hundreds of historical U.S. military dictionaries, sharing her archival journeys to document the stories of these lexicons and her favorite archaic military terms on Twitter at Elena Wicker. You can also find her work in War on the Rocks and on the Strategy Bridge. And if we have time today, I would love to hear more about the message cannonball that you were posting earlier today, because that's taking being a comms officer to a very interesting dynamic level right there. And finally, we're pleased to welcome longtime Team Krulak friend, Lieutenant Colonel Travis Horde, United States Marine Corps. He is an infantry officer and the current commanding officer of the Advanced Infantry Training Battalion, School of Infantry East. He is a graduate of the School of Advanced Warfighting and was previously assigned to the Marine Corps Warfighting Laboratory. He's written on enhanced infantry training methods in the Marine Corps Gazette, researched prospective manpower investments to effectively leverage autonomous systems and AI decision-making support tools, and has also highlighted the growing field of unmanned aircraft or aerial system support to the infantry. And he tweets at @MagTrav. Not sure if the F is silent or not, but it's at @MagTravF. So to all of our panelists here, thank you for coming on today. I know I kind of like cold called some of you and just kind of threw it out there out of the blue to see if you would answer the call, and you answered the call. So I definitely appreciate it. My track record of cold calling continues to be successful. So no shame on my end. So with that, like I said, we're going to just take a couple minutes here for everybody to sort of introduce themselves a little bit more and lay out why, kind of the why, the what, and the impact of how you being on social media has has helped share information and had an impact to our audiences. So I'm just going to kind of go. I'll go through I got you in the sort of the order I introduced on my board, so that's nice. So Sasha, go ahead and start with you.
So I run the Mother of Tanks account. It's I think four or 5 years old now, and for the last 3 years, this is my third year doing a year-long history series. The first one I started with the Combined Arms Center when I was working there, and 2 months into that series, Lieutenant General Rainey, now General Rainey, wanted he set it up so that they would continue to support my series as long as I wanted to keep making the content. And the first series, I was just looking at Army history. So when I decided, okay, yeah, I can keep going, I shifted to a more a much broader perspective. I'm looking at the Allies. It's all World War II based. So the Allies, the home front, and just all different, as many different aspects as I can. And now this is the third year, and the first year that I've added a podcast. So now I've got, yeah, I looked at it and I was like, you know what? I hate nights and weekends. So now I've got like no time. All my time is spent on that right now. But that's basically what I use social media for. I do have personal accounts, but I mean, they're mostly food or family or my dog. So when I first started, it was just with the Combined Arms Center, and it was 2 threads a week on their Twitter account. Now it's 1 thread a week on my account, unless I run out of time and I don't have time to do the thread, and then 1 thread on the Combined Arms Center account. And then the podcast is whenever I can manage it. Their account grew, both of our accounts grew significantly. The Center of Military History has been involved for since last year. And this year they're much more actively involved. So they're providing access to a lot of people that can contribute to this series or help me as far as resources and information go. I find that because I use my account for mostly that, I have kind of strict rules for myself, and so I don't end up in a lot of trouble. And sometimes it's hard because I want to voice an opinion sometimes, but I just choose not to because I don't want to risk making the Army look bad because they're supporting something that I'm doing and they're putting their name on it, you know? And so that's basically it. What do I get out of it? I mean, networking is definitely huge. I lost my ability to be anonymous. I was not going to be able to go into the Combined Arms Center and ask General Rainey to support this and then tell them I didn't want to put my name on it, you know, because that would be weird. And so I basically lost my ability to be anonymous, and it's fine. It's another reason why I really control my social media. But people are generally really positive about it. When I first started, you get the immediate, like, either old school historians or people that prefer old school historians. And they were like, you know, immediately right with the very first thread, they're like, hey, you didn't talk about this, you didn't talk about this. And I had to explain, this is a year-long series. Wait until the end and see what I miss, and then come back and talk to me. And by December of 2021, they had forgotten. So I didn't have to deal with them. But I tell people that if they don't like the content, it's not created for them. So my target audience is a mixture of military and civilian, and mostly people that don't. I want something for people that already like history and go after history content, but I'm not really writing for them. I'm creating for people that don't normally go after history content because I want to share stories that kind of educate people. And so many people, especially in our country, don't get a really solid history education, especially about this time period. And World War II is really important to the Army that we have now.
Great, thank you very much. And actually, you're for the rest of our panelists here, you brought up a couple points. You can either explore it here in your opening comments, or I was going to pull it out here later on. But looking some of the guardrails or rules you sort of put on yourself to avoid having that sort of blowback, as well as who's your target audience, who's this going out to. All right, but thank you. So we'll go next to Nikki Dean. Go ahead.
So first of all, thank you so much for putting this panel together today, and also for the fact that it's nice to see. Though I have met Sasha in person, and we've also done a podcast together, having known both Travis and Elena for as long as I've had the Dr. Natrix account up and running. It's been wonderful to share a platform and share voices with all three of these incredible content creators and really, really accomplished leaders. So I started, I've always been on social media. I ended up going off Twitter for a while because I didn't see the value of it. I used it more as a consumption tool when I was a younger officer, and then came back to it, oddly enough, through the Combined Arms Doctrine Directorate. I ended up getting a message one afternoon while I was on leave down sitting poolside in Alabama, and my boss sent me a note saying, "Hey, so there's this tweet where we got tweeted at from somebody who's over at the PCC, and he's got questions and he's trying to make a comment. How do we do Twitter, right? Basically, and how do we craft a better argument in such a short amount of characters?" So I was almost hesitant, but I ended up getting back online that afternoon, created another Twitter account to follow up on it, and it was off to the races from that point. What I began to realize was my personal Twitter account, which I've kept very transparent, along with, to a certain extent, my Instagram account, where I'm pretty open with the idea of using social media, partly because I was running these things in parallel, my personal account, with the work that was being done by Special Division out of the Combined Arms Doctrine Directorate, who manages the social media and the outreach portions of CAD. They are the ones that provide the backbone for the YouTube content that CAD produces, the Doctrine Digest videos that I think a lot of people are starting to get familiar with, but also the Breaking Doctrine podcast. So when I was running these things, it was a nice way for me to work as an outreach for a directorate with a goal in mind, and then to turn around and to use humor and to use that kind of transparent approach or just humanity to be able to reach a new audience. And I began to look at how you craft social media accounts, specifically almost like weapon systems in a way, and the way that we do the targeting process, or the way that we arrange for information collection and use. And I will confess, I didn't think that. That actually came from an account that I follow on Instagram and also on Twitter, the Tattooed Historian, who he produces primarily Civil War and I'd say early century warfare content, but he considers himself a Twitter historian, which is attempting to reach a new audience. And that idea of specifically tailoring a platform, to me, spoke volumes. It's much the same way that we would tailor a resume or tailor any sort of approach that we use for a tool. And I thought that's something that we don't discuss in military leadership. It's something we don't discuss in military education. And it's also something that I noticed we don't discuss when it comes to the pre-command course. And both guiding battalion commanders, sergeant majors, and command chief warrant officers up to brigade, that we're not showing them the ways that these different platforms reach different audiences and how to arrange that material appropriately. As far as what I get out of using social media, especially Twitter, while I was still in uniform, just before I retired, I got a lot of insight into how a new generation of individuals is consuming the doctrine that we produce, or that we were producing out of CAD. Recognizing that there were a lot of unknown manuals, that there were a vast array of tools that were just not being tapped into, partly because there's young readers didn't know that they were there, which is totally legit. There's a lot of information, or they had not been mentored really how to read them. Somebody had slung a book at them and said, "Read the doctrine, you should know this by now," and not taught them that there is an architecture and a way to consume doctrine that is not overwhelming. And after 20 years of reading this stuff as an Army aviation officer, well, shoot, I don't know how to read books. I read books and memorize things all the time. So might as well let let that knowledge, don't keep it secret, don't hoard it. So I might shove it out there into the world and see what happens. I've had good and bad experiences, in which that has been interesting, but at the same time, that's helped me refine the way and the approaches that I use. Though I'm not ever gonna, I think, compromise the way in which I provide material or the opinions that I have. I'm just very, very cognizant now that those opinions have a chance to go haywire, and that has helped me better understand how to block, how to mute individuals, and also how to champion ideas and how to champion personnel that are out there exposing themselves and new ideas on social media. Does that answer your question in old Sam's way?
Yeah, absolutely. And as a I'm still wearing the uniform, but I guess I'm technically a former aviator because I'm not going to fly again. But I read books, so just brute force memorization is a way to go after knowledge, but not necessarily the best way to get other people interested in your information. Okay, no, great. That is a great way to kind of open it up here. So I'll go next on my screen. I got Dr. Wicker. Go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having us, and it's really great to see, old friends and new on here. And I'm really looking forward to the conversation. So, to your questions, why am I on social media? So, initially, I was coerced in undergrad. I was in a class where we had to make a Twitter account and we had to tweet about nuclear security, of all things. So I created my Twitter account, tweeted 3 times. I had 3 followers, one of whom was my professor, the other was my teaching assistant, and did the assignment and then shut it all down for years. Fast forward, I think it was about 7 years. I was working on my PhD dissertation, and my advisor was like, you're studying something really interesting. If you want to connect with people, if you want to share your research, like, you should think about Twitter. So I revived my old account and started using it specifically for tweeting about the things that I was studying and the things that I was learning. So it's turned into something that's been really positive for me, mostly because I also, just as Sasha and Nikki were saying, I have strict rules for how I interact with Twitter and with all the people who come across my work or come across my name or come across my stuff online. I have a very strict approach to this, mostly to protect myself and my sanity. I revived this account specifically to tweet about my PhD research. And what I was looking at is I study the history of military dictionaries and jargon and innovation in language. So I was using case studies of historic future concepts and looking at how do you design jargon to change an organization? How do you design a buzzword? All of these really interesting things. And I think one of the reasons why it has gotten quite a bit of traction, and I found this when I was doing interviews for my research, is that we love to hate jargon and we love to hate buzzwords. Buzzword bingo, it's terrible, it's negative. But there's a strategy and there's a design behind all of these things, and there's a structure and a process, and this often overlooked body of documents in military dictionaries that are now pieces of doctrine and draw from doctrine and reinforce it, and are these really fascinating artifacts of moments in history where we spoke differently or we described things differently. And you can trace terms like strategy through hundreds of years of dictionaries and see how emphasis has changed. And I was really interested in sharing that because first of all, I loved it, right? I am obsessed. I collect these dictionaries. I collect old doctrine. I basically collect old terms that I find hilarious and ridiculous. And, one of the reasons why I was tweeting about message balls is that, I have all of these amazing old dictionaries. And I was looking through one from 1779, and it had 20 different types of balls, because balls was the word for bullets and for munitions. And apparently there was this thing where you would take a howitzer shell and you'd hollow it out, you'd stick your papers in it, and then you would fire it at your intended recipient. And then supposedly they would know it was coming and send someone out to look for the, incoming shell with all the documents in it. So I'm like, I have never heard of this. This is fantastic. Like that's essentially my Twitter account, is sharing these things that I find that, come from just flipping through, 300-year-old dictionaries. What I've gotten out of this is mainly, so there are things that I've gotten from, in terms of my research and in terms of my kind of professional development, is that I am technically a political scientist. I study international relations. I work on bureaucracy and organizational design, but I do it through language. And there is a very large network of political scientists on Twitter. And that was one of the reasons why my dissertation advisor recommended that I start using Twitter more frequently, was because there is this really strong network of academics, historians, political scientists, all sorts of research is represented online. And so I wanted to connect into that network, and I have been able to do so. It's led me to a lot of really interesting conversations, really interesting individuals who do amazing work, and a lot of practitioners and, folks like the entire panel here today that, share these really incredible, like, tidbits or long threads that have helped educate me and make me a better scholar. But I think probably the best part of it for me is I get a lot of messages from individuals who are in PME or who are, working on a master's thesis, who are interested in the history of a word. And so it is incredibly fulfilling to me to have the resources to be able to say, like, oh, okay, you're interested in the history of, the word operations, and we can track that. We can take it back a couple hundred years and figure out where that came from, and maybe it can help them in their work and in their education. And it's really, really wonderful to be able to kind of share all of that research and to share this corpus of military texts that I've been able to collect over the years. And so I find that really fulfilling to get to interact mostly with students, with PME students, and with graduate students who are in the civilian world, who are maybe interested in studying military history or doing something along those lines. And so it's been a really positive experience, with a lot of connections and a lot of ability to have fantastic conversations with aspiring military historians or current members of the military who are looking to expand their knowledge as well.
Great, thank you. And I think like your work it's a good example of just the stuff you sort of never knew that you didn't know, but now that it's out there, it can generate interest. And your message ball certainly brings a new meaning to shooting the messenger, right? I'll show myself out. Okay, so Lieutenant Colonel Hortzer, we'll go to you, and then after that, I'll start going into some questions here that have been generated.
Again, thank you for allowing me to be a part of this panel. I really don't feel like I'm at their level, and truly with the Krulak Center as an entity, just an amazing resource for the Marine Corps to do exactly what we're talking about. And it's been good to see from its inception to where it's going now. So for me, I mainly use it to stir up frivolous arguments and debates about tanks with retired Army generals. That is not it at all. I love that man. How I use it today, I pivoted from where I began when I was at recruiting stage in Baltimore, and as an online resource with the marketing and the sales aspect, the business aspect of how do we get the best young men and women into service, and for me, into the United States Marine Corps. The communications director at Headquarters Marine Corps, the Marine Corps Recruiting Command marketing does a tremendous job. There are so many awesome professionals that are teeing up what the conversation is going to be and drawing them to individual offices. What I found was how you could link that lower level marketing, the genuine, this is me, I live in your town content, to pivoting from that digital platform to a discussion at the dinner table with mom or dad or whoever about why your son or daughter should make this decision for the betterment of them. So marketing and sales, yes, but for now, we're talking about professional development. That linkage that was brought up earlier is, with our service members, how they consume the professional materials that, that we want them to, knowing that there is how they live and consume things aren't straight off the library shelf. And could a meaningful thread about the the North Africa campaign, spiked with a little bit of humor or memes, could that land them with appropriate links and resources to a published author or a primary source, something like that. So that's what I try to focus on from the historical perspective. From Marines are highly selective about our history. If I do this symbol and I take a dashing stance forward, everyone knows that is I'm talking about Iwo Jima and Mount Suribachi. The parts and pieces of our history that are being researched when we say we're going to come back to our maritime roots. Well, what does that really mean? We're not making anything new here, and I don't want to make this a force design topic, but I just had a conversation with a group of 38 sergeants in the small unit leader course, and we were discussing about the traditional roles of the Marine Corps as the landward side of the fleet, and what we are doing today in force design, and that resonates with them. Connecting that so that the complete history of the service that you're in, that makes the culture of the service that much stronger. And being able to talk, with Marines, I was saying before we started, there's been many times where I'm walking through base or I'm at a conference or a thing and someone references me by my @ They're like, hey, aren't you MagTrav? It's like, yes, very nice to meet you. And then they're like, that thing you said one day made me look up the thing, and I'm so glad you put the link in there. And we learned about X. So that's really the driving force. The other thing that I really try to focus on in my current role is Marines receiving the highest quality, realistic, and tough training from my perspective, and that takes a lot of time and a lot of intentionality about what is going to get put out there. But 9 times out of 10, what I put up in that regard, I'm hitting send while I'm at the range. From that, there's been feedback where it's like, wow, I didn't realize that we were doing it that way, or this is recognized by other services as well. Like, wow, this is the type of training that we would like to get after. Can we come over and train with you? Yes, we have had foreign partners and allies come in and do that. So that's a huge yes, and the sunsets, good. So that's a huge portion of it, and it's been a lot of fun. But I think outside of the fun aspect, there is utility in having that purpose and making sure people that can see that your Marines and your all volunteer force are doing everything as far as the training goes on a day-to-day basis to ensure we're fulfilling the mission that we have.
All right, great. Thank you, sir. So, and to everybody, appreciate your opening comments here. And to the audience, I'll throw out that as you have questions or things you'd like to direct to our panel, let's just go ahead and throw it in the chat and I'll get to it. And I've got a bunch of comments in there. I'm going to sort of try and package them into some questions here. But first thing I have is I want to kind of jump off of Lieutenant Colonel Hort's comments there and offer this question to all of you is, there's like the fun aspect of social media. And I know that there's a perception among certain demographics that, like, outside of sort of goofing around or sharing silly information, like that's all it is. It's a toy. It doesn't necessarily have any real world impact because it's a world that literally doesn't exist. It exists in ones and zeros on some computer server or on, signals flying around. However, I think as some of you already touched on, it's fair to say, like, it can have positive real world impacts in terms of how you do the engagement. And so I'd ask each of one of you to maybe elaborate on an example of how you've seen that. And Lieutenant Colonel Hort, I'll start with you. And I feel free to take a different example, but I remember for yourself kind of how some dots got connected. Because I think there was I forget if it was one of the Warfighting Society panels that you were there as an audience member, but there was some other random Marine, junior enlisted Marine, I think, who was in the audience and they had a question or comment in the course of that panel. And then you specifically asked them to follow up with you, right? And, in an earlier time, right, that level of direct engagement between a junior enlisted Marine and I think you may have been the CEO of AITB at that time already. I forget, but that ability to directly connect with someone, senior to you and in a position to do something with your comments, probably pretty rare, but this is a tool that lets it happen. So, sir, starting with you is, again, take a different example if you want, but a way that you've seen a concrete positive output in the real world of utilizing this tool or tools.
Yeah, so you're talking about Corporal Solentik. So yeah, that particular engagement that night was the Warfighting Society. If you remember, Lieutenant General Van Riper and General Zinni were on that one. Another Travis kind of thrusted me into open dialogue about the topic, which was fun of itself. But that Marine, when he came on, at the time he was a Lance Corporal, and I could see in the background that he was literally in his barracks room. Thinking back to when I was a Lance Corporal, like, was I going to be hanging out, listening to these people talk about this high level topic? I would probably not. So I thought that was awesome, and he is not the only one. So he is by no means an outlier. Our Marines are just eye-watering, the talent that I get to see on a daily basis. But I followed up with him, found out that he was going to be attending the Advanced Infantry Marine course in just about a month and a half after that engagement. I shook his hand when he came in, but throughout the course, I talked with him about what his perspective was with the training, and then followed up with him at the end and had a conversation in here about a wide range of topics. And he just hit me back. So connecting those things, his individual interest in the force development process, unique in of itself, but able to have the conversation with him was that to me was special. There's all kinds of different examples of that that I've been able to have.
Great, thank you, sir. And again, no, not picking out that any one thing. I know there's a lot, but just to me, watching that interaction and seeing how that initial question had a positive impact, and how going back to what we were talking before we recorded, stuff that happens in this digital world can have in real life connections and positive growth. So it's stuck
up there. I mean, that engaged leadership. Our barracks is right here. I could choose to sit in this office and look in the barracks, look at the barracks, or I could walk over to the barracks and engage with the Marines where they live at times, when necessary. The same thing, the same opportunity exists where our Marines, soldiers, sailors, airmen, guardians, they want to be able to have that human interaction and dialogue at times. And so if I chose to never go eat in the chow hall, that's a decision. If I choose to not put myself in the same place that they are, that's also a decision. So there's different ways to do it, and at different echelons, there's definitely different methods of which to do it. But there's a leadership aspect to just outside of just the development topic that we're on today.
Yeah, thank you, sir. And I think it's another good point to highlight, because your ongoing discussions about tanks with another senior, Army general or former general, right? I mean, that's the fact that he was there too. I think that's an example of how leadership can be used in the digital realm. Okay, so I'm going to direct the same question to the rest of our panelists here, and your order has shifted, so I'm just going to go in the order that I see it now. So, Nikki, you have an example you can maybe share of how your connections have had a real concrete output.
So, kind of the same way that Travis's experiences have gone, where you interact with soldiers who have genuine questions, or you interact with individuals who are working in and around the Department of Defense or the defense industry, and they've got genuine questions about the history of doctrine or a doctrinal manual. The fact that somebody can immediately contact me, or, for all the inferences of sliding into one's DMs, kind of has the ability to know that somebody can reach out to me or reach out to Kat at any given time and ask a question. That is immediately impactful, because you're exposing somebody to the body of knowledge. That I can't tell you the number of times in which I have aided individuals who've hit me up with a question about, is there a manual that covers this topic? And I'm like, what are you trying to get to? What's the end state that you're trying to reach? Let's unpack everything, and we'll get you an incomplete body of knowledge, and I'll also get you some other information, maybe an obsolete doctrine. The obsolete doctrine is never obsolete. It's just an artifact that we use differently. It's an option, right? That's a wonderful tool to be able to connect directly with an audience. The one thing I will say is this idea of reaching out across a platform has helped me reach across the pond to the Atlantic side, specifically to work with Land Warfare Center. So FM30's work, especially dealing with Appendix A, the principles of war, to kind of help understand that, I went and talked with a couple of individuals who are genuinely becoming the British Army's subject matter expert on the principles and how they apply, and also in the history of JFC Fuller. And when you have an opportunity to go to talk with, and specifically Sergeant Major Paul Barnes, who was a guest on Breaking Doctrine podcast, who helped me formulate the way I was going to structure the discussion on FM30's principles of war and how to look at these things with a genuine use. The same way with being able to connect with individuals from the Krulak Center, or that I'd heard speaking on the Krulak Center in the Brutecast, connecting with Travis to talk about maritime operations and Army operations in a maritime dominant environment, specifically to the new version of FM30 that just came out. The ability for me to go to those folks and ask questions and then get feedback has been profound, because it's different when you're able to work with very, very intelligent, very smart, very fast, and also very approachable people. It's leveled the playing field in a completely new way. And I am every day appreciative for the connections and relationships that I've been able to form on social media or through social media and this work. So, and also it's really nice to know that for the first time, somebody contacted me a while ago. I posted a thread about unpacking the book for a joint publication on non-combatant evacuations, and a soldier, I do believe it was a soldier, posted back, I wish I would have known about this book when I worked on Peninsula and Korea, working on the NEO plan. And that to me has always stuck with me. The idea that somewhere, first of all, a leader didn't let them know, PME didn't let them know, that buried in the bowels of all the joint publications is this book that would provide an architecture and language that is crucial to a mission set that we're doing right now. That wounded me a little bit as a doctrine developer, but it also inspired me to keep doing this thing where the more and more I dig through obscure manuals, or what feels like obscure manuals, and share them and provide a connection to how everyday soldiers should use them, everyday Marines should use them. Because sometimes there are books that we share among the services. That's pretty legit. I'm not gonna lie. That's fun, and fun in this really nerdy way. I get that's a bizarre thing to call it fun. So I will now yield my time to my fellow panelists.
Not just with the history stuff. So I do the history series. It's been 3 years now that I'm doing it. But before that, something that I was kind of known for was connecting people. There would be, I've been within that Mill Twitter community for probably 6 years, 5 or 6 years, give or take. And I would see people like maybe an NCO or a junior enlisted soldier that posts something on there that has a question, and nobody's giving any kind of good guidance. But I happen to know that this other person is somebody that's like in E8 or an E9 that's got information in the same field, and I can put them together. And or I'd see lieutenants with questions, and I would put them together with majors and colonels and lieutenant colonels who could answer those questions and provide insight. And so I would connect people, and that was kind of what I was known for, is like doing things behind the scenes, connecting people. With the history stuff, I started, since the very beginning of my history series, I would prioritize Army resources, because I know that there's a lot of resources that nobody even thinks to look for them, like the CGSC and Carl websites, and the DTEC website, and the Army University Press has a whole bunch of stuff. Just all of these websites that have content that are primary and secondary sources that they could use The Carl website, you can get all kinds of the declassified paper reports and things from World War II, from Vietnam, from Korea, and the Carl librarians, and Carl would be the Combined Arms Research Library, which is at Fort Leavenworth, which if you have never been and you get an opportunity, it is a wonderful place to work, right? And it's that's where I met Nikki. And but their research librarians are fantastic. The number of times where I've been working on my series, and now granted, I mean, I'm doing the series for the Combined Arms Center with the Combined Arms Center. It's a Sasha Maggio project, but I'm doing it and giving it to the Combined Arms Center. But I would submit like a ticket asking for, all right, this is what I'm trying to cover. For example, I'm about to cover Operation Husky, right? Because this year's the 80th anniversary. And I sent them back in January, I sent them a message and I said, this is what I'm going to cover. This is when I'm going to cover it. I can search the website and find things, but do you have a specific list or something that you can help me make sure that I'm getting the best information for the research that I'm doing? And they sent me back, it's got to be like 12 or 13 pages of links directly to the reports and the content. They also attached PDFs and things like that. And it's like that kind of stuff that I then take those links and I put them at the end of my threads when I'm posting them, or as reference material on the videos or the podcast, whenever I use that stuff. And I will, when somebody asks me, hey, how did you find this? I direct them to the same sources that I use. So, I mean, as far as like an education tool, I'm trying to make it as useful as possible, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. Thank you. And okay, Elena, we'll have you back clean up on this question before we go on to the next one.
Okay, so I think I have approval from Nikki to share. Okay, awesome. So 2 things. The first, for like concrete connections, proving a difference. I think particularly for me as a researcher, being able to connect to historians has been really incredible. So like just for an example, NATO writes its own dictionaries. However, in the early days of those dictionaries, they all had to be destroyed once they were considered obsolete. So if anyone finds the OG first NATO dictionary anywhere, I will be forever in your debt. But I was tweeting about this and being angry about the fact that old dictionaries were being destroyed. So then one of the main historians for NATO reached out to me and was like, I will go check the archive for you. Apparently they have like a massive, the vault. He's going to go check the vault. So he went to the vault and like found, he didn't see a number 1, but he did find a lot of the other older ones that had been slated for destruction that had been saved in the NATO vault. But I think for concrete changes that you can actually like go and see right now, I have to give major kudos to Nikki Dean for this one. One of the data sets that I work with is old versions of FM30, so operations doctrine. And I was running a whole bunch of statistical analyses on these documents. I was really interested in who they were quoting and citing. So I built this data set of all of the quotes and citations out of FM30 across its existence, and found that in the history of FM30, barring the most recent one, a woman has never been quoted or cited in Army operations doctrine. And I was like, this is an interesting finding that is mostly problematic because, if you don't see yourself in the documents, there's you don't believe that you can be it. So I was really interested in this finding. And I'm like, throw a tweet out there. I'm like, a woman has never been cited or quoted in FM30. And Nikki saw this tweet and then led the charge to include women's scholarship in Army operations doctrine. And actually, if you look at the most recent version of FM30, you will see women quoted and cited for the first time in the history of this doctrine because of a random Twitter connection where, our work entwined at that moment. And, her seeing that. And of course, I have no impact on doctrine development, right? Like I'm just analyzing all of the, archaic stuff. But she had the position and the intent to follow through on that and make a real concrete change to how FM30 has been drafted. And even beyond just the United States Army, also members of our allied military, like our allies, reached out to me and were like, hey, we saw your data and we want to include women's scholarship in our Army's operations doctrine. And I believe, and Nikki, please correct me if I'm wrong, they also reached out to Nikki and she helped them work through how to include women's scholarship and represent a huge portion of our force in the operations doctrine that drives the majority of what we do. So that was a very concrete example of Twitter leading to real change in Army doctrine. So that was really, really exciting to me. And I was so grateful to Nikki for seeing that, picking up on it, and actually following through and making the change that, I think was a long time coming. So that's a concrete example that you can see. If you go and, open up your copy of FM30, you will see women's work. Fantastic historical research represented in that document now.
Great, thank you. Thank you all. So kind of with those points and those, those concrete examples all in mind, I want to shift to some sort of themes that I sort of put together from each of you in your introductory comments in terms of, you've all obviously put in personal energy and interest into cultivating these platforms as tools. However, I think we've seen a couple of different extremes in sort of how organizations approach the use of these. From an organization may say, yes, you will go and do stuff on social media, but sort of without any further guidance or strategy for I'm here now, you told me to do it. What do you want me to do now? Right? What is the message to share? Or the flip side where if you didn't put your own personal energy and initiative into it, nobody would tell you to. No emphasis on using it as a possible tool for leadership engagement, for sharing resources, sharing knowledge. And I forget who it was, but someone mentioned this is not something that is, it's not covered or highlighted or trained in any formal sense in terms of our training and education, various curricula. So I'm curious, I'd like your thoughts on, why is that those sort of either firewalled or completely agnostic about it? Why are those sort of the organizational approaches, and what can we possibly do to change that and see these things as useful tools that the sort of leaders at all levels should be utilizing? And let's see, I'll have Nikki, if you want to go ahead and take a crack at the question.
So as far as how do we kind of bridge that gap? Well, first of all, you've got to, there's two sides to it, right? There's the non-structured use that we don't teach in PME, which is that you have to have leaders that use social media and then provide a way to have soldiers emulate that, to meet your soldiers where they are, as Lieutenant Colonel brought up. The idea that it should be included in PME is a much more structured thing. I think it would be wonderful, but I know, especially when we talk about the requirements of command teams, it's already a densely packed schedule. That's a lot to ask of somebody who is unfamiliar with a platform, unfamiliar with the tool, to immediately start shoving that into additional instruction. So maybe it's viable now to start thinking about how do we include this more. The generation that's coming into service right now, unlike the generation that I came in with, these are individuals who are digital natives. They are already in the sphere of social media. They're already participating in online dialogue. They use tools that I don't even use anymore, though I got off Facebook and I'm like, oh, that's for old people now. That, folks will look at me and be like, that Twitter, that's for old people. And those dynamics changed. So how do you keep up with it? Unfortunately, I think this is a chance where younger soldiers and younger Marines, airmen, guardsmen can potentially teach those who are a little bit older, long in the tooth, if you shall, the benefits of social media and then the best ways to use the platform, much the same way, like I said, like it's almost a weapon system that you use for targeting. Does that kind of help answer the question or at least give a little clarity?
So I completely agree with Nikki's point about leveraging the skills of younger soldiers who are, or, you know, younger members of the military who are much more comfortable with these types of platforms and putting them in those roles that would allow them to help craft the organization's narrative online, because it really is crafting your identity. It's not an instant, you know, we are on Twitter now, you know exactly who we are. It's much more that like the way that you tweet over time creates what your account means and how you approach your research area or the way that you share information, right? Like, are they longer history threads or are they, you know, little snippets? Are they, you know, threads on how to read doctrine, or is it like leadership guidance presented in one single tweet? And so the way that you can make those decisions on how you want to present information and how you want to interact. I do think that there is a requirement for some balance there, because the internet can be a terrible place, particularly for women, especially on Twitter. It can be a very challenging ecosystem to even exist in. And so having conversations with people who are knowledgeable about the platform, who have designed their own, you know, rules, their own structures for how they interact with Twitter and how they protect themselves, could help organizations design a framework for how their younger or their, you know, their tweeters interact with other people on the platform, or how they, you know, approach designing that organization's identity online, because it's not so simple as just starting to tweet. I see a lot of reticence to continue tweeting after one bad experience sometimes with organizations that, you know, maybe one was phrased poorly. And so then there's like a lot more hesitance to put themselves out there again. I think it requires a conversation with individuals who are knowledgeable about Twitter, but also that, you know, there's a lot of opportunity for information to be gathered on Twitter about individuals and organizations that perhaps is not meant to be shared. So there absolutely needs to be a conversation about the frameworks and about guidelines for how we interact with Twitter or with other social media platforms. But absolutely, I think we should leverage the skills of younger individuals who are, you know, natives to these platforms, but also keeping in mind that it's not a perfect space. And, you know, we have a responsibility to protect ourselves. But if organizations are putting individuals in the roles of spokespeople, which is what they are when they are designing these tweets, they need to make sure that they give those individuals the tools to have a, you know, safe and effective experience online. So perhaps that was a little bit more negative, but I do feel pretty strongly about this and about, you know, making sure that not only are you effective online, but you're doing it in a way that maintains, you know, some of your privacy and that, you know, protects you, because it can be a very challenging ecosystem to exist in.
Oh God, I can't believe I'm going to do this. I'm going to piggyback. Oh God. And I think that's probably one thing that I commend Elena for saying, is that if you love what your soldiers are doing by sharing the story of your organization, not just through your professional accounts, but also through their own personal accounts, the idea of protecting individuals as influencers. And I'd love to see and ask Trav specifically, like, how has your command ensured your protection? Because you are tweeting from your own accounts or you are sharing your own Instagram information. How are they ensuring your protection about those things? And what kind of conversations have you done with that? Because I think that would be a great tool going forward for any leader who wants to encourage their soldiers getting involved or to develop an SOP for that.
I was at a conference for the last 2 weeks that was designed for incoming, mainly in current command. And there was I thought it was awesome that the communications director came down and briefed all of those 05, 06 commanders and the 05 and 06 sergeants major. These are the themes that we're in the direction that we're going with. Here's what you need to stay within policy and guideline, but very much that we want you to tell, speaking to the general audience, we want you to be able to do this. The American public wants to see the day-to-day. There's a way to do it, and there's what the themes are, for the month, for here is nested with what the regiment is doing, and that is connected through what training command is doing. That is becoming much more structural, and that's a good thing. That gives that gives that local command that has like this is what your Marine did today. That allows that to reinforce the institutional message from headquarters Marine Corps. The aspect of this is somewhat tangential for the analogy, but there was a time somewhere around 05, 06, if I had to put a point on it, where the term strategic corporal, which always has a great connotation, somewhere around that time got a negative connotation, and that term is starting to take a rebound. But that strategic corporal that is imbued in the ethos of the Corps, they're trained and educated to see that fleeting moment on the battlefield, to take initiative and get that thing done. When you get into a more mature, less kinetic environment in a urban counterinsurgency setting, one person, one misstep can rattle the entire framework of what that type of operation could be doing. And then it became viewed as, in the terms of risk and not necessarily opportunity. My sense, and this is perhaps Travis talking out of turn, but my sense is, the institution is starting to take the upswing of that. Like, yes, we can leverage this, but we have to do it within, the structure that reinforces the line of thinking that you're doing this because you feel compelled to, but it is going to reinforce honor, courage, commitment, like whatever the thing is. So that I think moving forward, there's my opinion is that we're taking positive steps forward to leverage it in the way that we would like to see it done.
All right, great. Thank you very much, sir. And Elena, definitely Nikki, appreciate that handoff. That was very, very good transition. So Sasha, I'll leave the question to you for your comments and thoughts, I think, before we start wrapping things up here.
Sure. So I am nowhere near as knowledgeable as these three. I'm actually surprised to even be included, but they're some of my favorite Twitter users. So as far as like social media goes, if you're not using it, you're not going to be comfortable with it. So especially if you're in the service, if the service is expecting you to use it and you're not using it regularly, you're not going to be able to use it when you need to use it for whatever that reason, whether it be that now, the whole Army wants to start a different type of messaging campaign or whatever, but like what Elena said was how it's not as simple as just getting on Twitter and starting to tweet. It kind of made me laugh because for the entire first season, so my account, I never built my account initially to do this. It just kind of happened. My series grew out of us working from home during 2020 and me having the just the ambition to put this together and then throw it at a then 3-star, now 4-star, and be like, hey, I'd like to run this off of your account. What do you say? And it just kind of worked out. But last year when the Marine Corps Museum joined me to do a Pacific Theater branch, they had 2 guys who, as part of their regular job, were able to be tasked with creating content as part of the series. And between the 2 of them, who were very knowledgeable, but the amount of work, like I'm very prolific for lack of a better word, they did not understand how much work is involved in doing what I do for these series. And so even two guys who were able to do it full time and be paid for it, because mine is just a hobby, they could barely keep up with half of the workload that I was doing. So it is definitely something that you need to be doing in order to be good at it. And I was making notes while everybody was talking. So with social media though, like it's fine to have just a personal account. I've had personal accounts. I still have personal accounts and I use them just however I want. If you follow me on Instagram, it is like 99% food. But if if you're going to have an account on social media and you want to use it for something, you need to like define that intent. so that you know how to define your guidelines and your rules, because you cannot rely on the services to make those rules for you. Because we have seen that no matter how hard they try, they're never going to think of everything. And they are, and by making guidelines for social media use, they're basically, there's always going to be people that look at it and go, okay, these are the guidelines, which means anything that's not in these guidelines is okay. And that, it creates a weird kind of gray area where you need to be thinking. But so you need some kind of intent, and your content, if you're consistent with your content, your account's going to grow. That's going to increase your visibility. So like I had said, I don't remember if we started recording or not, but I lost my ability to maintain anonymity by doing this series with the Army. So that was my sacrifice. It's like, okay, no more anonymous mother of tanks. I don't mind sticking my name on things, but when if you don't have rules for yourself, then when your visibility increases, things that you say can become problematic, and you need to be aware of that. It could be problematic for you. It could be problematic for your organization. And that's a responsibility that you are now, like, whether you wanted it or not, that's a responsibility that you now have. So setting rules is good. Being consistent is good. It makes you look trustworthy. It makes you more reliable as a source of content and information. But with this responsibility, you're also a leader. And whether you want to be a leader or not, or whether you see yourself as a leader or not, you can either lead by example in a positive way and have these guidelines, and you demonstrate, okay, this is what I do, and this is how you can do what I do and stay out of trouble and use your content for good. Or you can do it another way, so what you want to consider the example that you're setting. I hold myself to a high standard, and I don't generally hold other people to that same standard, but I try to be a good example. But yeah, so like as far as my content goes, no one asked for this. I volunteered it, and I was asked if I would like to continue, then the Combined Arms Center will continue supporting. And so I said, yeah, that's basically it, that you need to set rules. You need to have some kind of intent. I guess you're the commander of your account, right, Nikki? So you need to set your intent so that you know what you're doing.
Great, thank you and I think that your points there about leadership none of that should be news to anyone who's worn the uniform or holds a leadership position, right? Like your troops, they see everything you do and everything you don't do, and that translates into what you do and don't do in the digital space as well. We're past an hour here, and I want to make sure we honor everybody's time, since I know Sasha, you're probably closest to 5:00 somewhere out there in Germany, or past that, as I see the sun setting in your face.
Right in my eye, yeah.
Yeah. So great. So I want to give a chance for everybody. Any final comments or thoughts you'd like to share before we wrap things up here in Sasha, since we had you on just now. Go ahead and take it away, and then maybe you get a chance to turn your screen off so the sun doesn't blind you.
Nothing brilliant. Nothing brilliant. These people that you have here on this panel, they're phenomenal people. I've read I got that book from the Marine Corps University. It's your book, right?
The Boyd book?
I thought that your name was on a book that I got.
Yeah, I do have a book under Marine Corps University Press on medieval warfare doctrine for you doctors.
His name is on many books.
No, I thought you said it was on the green books. And I was like, he's not that old.
No, but I know I'm old enough to know what a green book is and have held one in my hands at some point.
The Army green books, like the Army history books, they were all written in like the 50s and 60s. So I use them a lot for my series content. I've got nothing brilliant to add. I'm just grateful to be included. And anybody here that follows my series, thank you for continually supporting my ridiculous need to continue telling these stories about World War II and basically where we all come from.
All right, great. Thank you. Nikki, we'll go over to you. Any final thoughts or comments?
I would say, honestly, I'm extremely grateful to the Krulak Center for having us on, and extremely grateful also to Army Leadership Exchange for the opportunity, though we said competition with each other, right, for March Madness. The truth be told, it was brought to my attention on Twitter from somebody else that I know through the same connections, who is the president of the Military Writers Guild, who had mentioned that, hey, by the way, everybody knows each other in this bracket. We're all connected to each other. Folks watch and advocate for each other's careers. They advocate for each other's social experiences on social media. We have a pool of individuals. So the idea that we compete against each other, it's completely this idea, a more nobler version of competition, right? The fact that we all try to make each other better, steel or something like that. I think in the end, the most important thing I could possibly offer is I am not remarkable as an officer. I did not do anything significant with my career. But what I have done is serve in the Army for a few years. I think that's important for bridging a gap on conversations with the civ-mil divide, with this also the ability to be able to share the stories of service members. Social media is a method of doing that for me as I continue this path forward in retirement from the military. Also, as I continue on into museum studies, I'll be reaching back to the Mil Twitter community, back to the military Instagram community to get ideas, to get greater understanding of what's still happening and what still work needs to be done within the War Museum and the Military History Museum sphere that I'll be entering into as a retiree. That's important to me. So though I guess, you transition your career, you transition your accounts, but the truth is you never transition the friendships that you make along the way. Bum. I'm gonna yield my time.
All right, great. Thank you. Dr. Wicker, over to you.
So again, I have nothing brilliant to say either. I am very grateful to have been included on this panel and in the March Madness or March Masters. So thank you for bringing us all together, Ian. I guess just one comment on Nikki's mentioning competition. It is really funny to me because I do not see Twitter as a competitive space because it is such a huge space that, like, when you find your corner and you find your little niche thing, that maybe our accounts are a little bit special because they do something unique. And like, that's really what I think captures people and gets people interested. And to that point, I think that people shouldn't be, for as much as I advise caution in being active on social media, overall, Twitter has been a positive experience for me. And I think that people can get a lot out of, this incredibly weird space where you can connect with people all over the world who are interested in something that you do, or if you're interested in someone's work, I think you should also feel free to reach out to people on that platform, because it is an incredible way to start conversations that kind of, and being wary about the fact that it like totally bypasses the hierarchy in a lot of ways. And it, creates connections and linkages that you wouldn't necessarily have in daily life because you don't come across thousands of people every day in the same way that you do online. So in closing, I think that this is, especially for military content, it's such a huge space. And I think that there's so many things that are still unexplored that, if you have a niche interest or just a normal interest, because people who comment on, some of the more common things that you come across, are also enormously successful on the platform. And even if you're not looking to become a content creator, I know I get so much out of conversations with people on Twitter who are, interested in a random term from 1805 or something like that. It's just been a really positive experience. And I would highly recommend that, people use the tools that are at our disposal to build your connections and learn, because honestly, it is, especially I think the corner that we all exist in is that it's a learning environment, and it's a teaching space as well. For those of us who, have something unique that we study or unique that we've experienced. Other than that, I just want to say thank you. It's been a really fantastic conversation, and it's really wonderful to meet those of you who I've yet to meet in person, digitally. And I'm just really grateful for having been a part of this. So thank you so much for hosting this.
All right. Well, great. Well, thank you for joining us. And Lieutenant Colonel Howard, sir, we'll turn it to you to bring us home.
Perfect. So I guess my final thought is, it is additive. This is not a binary thing. The Marine Corps Association, when you look at, the Gazette and the Leatherneck, and then the tremendous online resource for staff rides, down to like individual maps. Just like the question was asked earlier, you know, what are some resources that go to the Marine Corps Association website, and you can have immediate access to so many campaigns and battles that you can take to a spot and just, you know, do leader development. But to the point of that, it is additive. Online engagement does not replace writing to the Gazette or any other professional organization. I wrote for the Gazette about this time last year. I still talk about the things online. I stopped saying small UAS. It's robotics, and it's intelligent robotics and autonomous systems. UAS is too constraining. But towards the current use of that type of robotics and current conflict right now, that changes everything about warfare going forward. It closely parallels the development of manned aviation from the Wright B Flyer. So we're seeing that those changes, making those connections and making it available to the students in the profession at arms. That should be the point. How you do it is what platforms you use, and knowing what audiences each platform reaches and why and how. There's some self-study that has to go there. I saw Megan was talking about use your professional ComStrat or PAO, whatever the organization calls it, as a resource. If you're a commander or wherever you're at, portion of it is not binary also. But yeah, again, thanks for having this. The March Masters was a whole lot of fun. That thing is what led us to this. If you go back and you remember, there was some shaming involved, and I think this panel had a different title at one point. But yeah, this has been good. Thanks so much, Ian.
All right, great. Well, thank you, sir. Thank you for your comments, and to everyone on our panel. I think it was Nikki talked about, just sort of sliding into DMs. Totally did that with all of you to just like see if we can make this happen, and we did. So definitely grateful for your time and for your engagement, and I look forward to getting this one out to our audience here in the next couple of days as well. So we're almost at 90 minutes, so I'll keep my final thoughts here short. To our audience, thank you all for joining us as always. And as always, we'll try and get this out here in the next day or two. We do have a couple more brewcasts in the pipeline coming up next week. On Monday, the Talent Management Strategy Group under Headquarters Marine Corps is going to return to the brewcast, and we're going to get some updates both on the Talent Management 2030 program itself, as well as some of the outputs of supporting conferences and meetings that have gone in that have collected fleet input into that. So if you're following the force design stuff, we're going to have those folks back here to tell us where things stand in the talent management realm. And then next Friday, we're talking about other sort of sliding into DMs. Good digital connections with our friends at the Air Force's Tesseract office has given us a chance to talk to Dr. Norva Ben-Sahal and Lieutenant General David Barno, retired U.S. Army. And they're a couple of the biggest names in looking at both historical and current day military adaptations and innovations. So we're very happy to get them on. They're going to talk about their work as well as some of their insights on how we're seeing military adaptation going on now in real time. As Lieutenant Colonel Horde mentioned, seeing uses of things like UAS and autonomous robotic systems and all kinds of use cases that we're all in imagination until they were applied on the real world battlefield. So we're excited to have both of them here to talk to us. So again, thank you all. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you all in the next episode. Thanks for joining us. As always, we depend on support and feedback from the Team Krulak community to constantly improve our offerings and reach a wider audience. So if you have feedback on this episode, please take a moment to fill out the survey linked in the show notes to help us do better. Also, if you enjoyed this episode, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel on YouTube, or leave us a review on the podcast app of your choice. It truly does help us reach a wider audience. Thank you as always for your support, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Education is what's important. Training, preparation for the expected. Education, preparation for the unexpected.